What's going on, YouTube? Welcome to today's video. And just to start, because Yumi got a lot of love in the last video, just want to say hello to Elon as well. Good boy. So we're going to be getting into priming yourself, potentiating your next block of training now that gyms are opening back up. Life to an extent is starting to resume. It is Monday, New Jersey, 6/21, 6/22, 6 June, I'm 22% charged, something like that, whatever that Monday is. So this is like part 2 of phase 2, so most things are open besides gyms. So our governor said that should be happening soon. So I want to share with you guys my strategy for potentiating my training for when gyms open up so I can make the most out of that training. And what you guys may be able to do yourselves as well to make sure that your body is primed to be very productive with your next training block inside of the gym. A lot of us have been able to do some at-home training to some extent at home. After 12 months with limited equipment, you have very limited exercise selection. It gets very stale. And even me having dumbbells and a couple barbell type movements and accessibility, things have gotten stale for me. I miss my hack squats, my leg press, and some of those fun things you get to do in the gym. So what I want to go over with you guys first is we're going to talk about how to prime yourself for productive training, some of the things you have to worry about. So a lot of things I'm going to be covering. You can click off this video if you don't like the deeper nuances, the scientific principles of training. This is the stuff I love to talk about, love to learn about. So this is therapy for me, just to talk to the camera about things I'm learning and things that intrigue me. So hope that this is going to be beneficial for you guys. If anything, it'll help you with your long-term trajectory, things to think about as you progress through your training career. Also, these are probably the finer details that are, as you get more advanced, they're going to matter a little bit more. But as you're newer in training, you can make some pretty good gains without so many things going in your way. Less time training and a calorie surplus. Maybe you don't have to be perfect with your protein all the time. And a lot of other things can play into it. But I want to share with you guys how to make the most gains in your long-term training career and also how to periodize your training. So first, priming yourself for the next training block. So what we want to do is, in terms of priming, you want your body to be resensitized to hypertrophy training, because in terms of being productive training, I'm talking in the context of hypertrophy, context of making gains, getting humongous, because that's my goal right now. If you're a powerlifter and your goal is strength training and just getting a sick 1 rep max on the squats, you're going to have some different details to kind of fine tune. What is best for one thing may not be great for another. That's always important as well. And that goes without saying. So we want to potentiate ourselves for the next training block to be very effective. So taking back during this kind of lockdown, training at home, you're trying to get some hypertrophy stimulus, trying to stimulate the muscles, get a good amount of volume in that 8 to 20 rep range, getting relatively close to failure within 3 reps from failure. That's going to stimulate hypertrophy to a great degree. Usually getting 8 to 12 sets per muscle in a training session is going to be a really good spot for stimulating that muscle and getting the most bang for your buck, probably 2 to 4 times frequency per muscle. So we're going to say pretty much that's what I've been doing the last 12 weeks when we've been locked in. So what I'm doing now to prime myself for the next block to be very productive. I've been in a calorie surplus since my bodybuilding show in November. Now it's June. It's about 7 months into surplus. Gained about 35 pounds almost. Went from like 189 up to 223. So first we're going to tackle this. We're going to talk about training adjustments, and then we're going to go into nutrition adjustments. So first, what I'm taking in terms of my training is I did 12 weeks of hypertrophy training. What happens when you give your body a certain stimulus for a long period of time is it desensitizes to that stimulus. Same thing, think about caffeine intake. If you drink a coffee a day, that first week gets you pretty wired. First time having coffee, you're like, whoa, what is this? And you're like off the walls. After a month, one cup does nothing for you. Now you're getting 2 cups to get that same stimulation. Eventually that does nothing. And then what you sometimes want to do with coffee, when you're getting to a very high intake, is you take a resensitization phase. You deload your caffeine intake, you're gonna reduce your, I believe it is your adenosine receptors. And what that's going to do is allow you to resensitize to caffeine. And then when you have one cup again, you're going to get that old stimulation that you used to get. So think of that with training as well. If you're doing hypertrophy training for such a long period of time, what you're going to have to do is you're getting diminishing returns over time. Your body is desensitized to it. So you want to have a resensitization phase. So what we would do after probably 2 mesocycles, mesocycle being 4 to 6 weeks of training, I like to take, or 4 to 8 weeks of training. So I did 12 weeks of hypertrophy training. I want to take a 3 to 4 week, maybe 2 to 4 week maintenance training phase or strength training phase. So the main goals of this phase is, as I said earlier, is usually to maximize, optimize the amount of stimulation for hypertrophy you get per session, per muscle group. It's generally 8.5 sets for a certain muscle in one training session. 8 to 12 is probably that bigger range, and this was also gone over by James Krieger's research review, where he went over frequency and total sets per week per muscle group to optimize your growth. So think of that as do 8 sets of bicep curls in a training session, but now you can do that 3 times a week instead of doing 24 sets of bicep curls 1 time per week. You're going to benefit from spreading it out, and you're going to do best spreading it out into those bouts being 8 to 12 sets. So that being said, we're going to say 8 to 12 sets per session. We're going to want to bring that down to maintenance volume. We don't want to be knocking on the door of hypertrophy anymore, so we want to kind of go back to what allows our body to maintain muscle size, so which is actually a lower volume significantly, and you're going to want to allow things to resensitize. So the cellular signaling that says, hey, build muscle, you want that to not be kind of pushed as much, so that, again, like overloading with limited sets is going to give you a better bang for your buck, better ROI, return on investment. So what we're going to do, bring down to maintenance volume in terms of training. So let's say 3 sessions of 8 sets of chest work. So that's 24 sets per week. We're going to bring that to like 2 to 4 sets per session. So it's bringing a pretty big reduction in volume, but maintaining muscle is hard to gain and it's hard to lose actually. Surprisingly, it's pretty darn hard to lose, which is good news, especially if you think of someone who hasn't trained in 3 months, they get back in it within 6 weeks, they're back to their old size. Muscle memory is a legitimate thing. So with this being said, what you want to do to resensitize yourself to a really productive hypertrophy session or training block is you're going to want to reduce your volume in terms of total sets, probably to like 2 to 4 sets per session, and maybe 2 to 3 sessions per week. And that should be enough to maintain your current muscle mass that you have. You won't have that chronic pump when your body is constantly, when you do a lot of volume, your muscles are inflamed to an extent because they're rebuilding, they're recovering. So you're not going to have that kind of, almost like a pump you constantly have. So visually they may be a little bit smaller, but you're not going to actually lose that muscle tissue. So that being said, you can use this period for strength training. So you still want to have those sets, those 2 to 4 sets per session. You can still make those relatively difficult. The main thing that's going to help you reduce like your fatigue or resensitize is bringing down that volume, not necessarily stimulating that 8 to 20 rep range. So you can do some strength training. Maybe bring your rep ranges down to like 3 to 6 reps per set, and then you can see how much stronger you can get. See what your bench press strength is. So that's what I'm kind of doing right now, bringing down my total volume, going more towards that strength training as well. So that is how I'm adjusting my training to resensitize in terms of training. Hope that all makes sense. So the other thing is tackling this in terms of nutrition. So again, as I said, muscle is hard to gain, hard to lose. So what I'm taking is what's called a mini cut, and this is going to be a pretty aggressive 3 to 4 week period of dieting. So instead of doing that gradual approach, say I'm in a calorie surplus of 3,400 calories, my intake 3,400 calories per day, helping me gain about 2 to 3 pounds per month. So slow rate of gain. What I'm going to do instead of like, if I were to go on a cut, maybe I'd be a little stepwise, go 3K, 2,800, 2,600, and every time I plateau, move my weight down. Instead, with this mini cut, I'm just going straight from 3,400 to 2,500 calories per day. Really just trying to get in a deficit, make the most out of these 3 to 4 weeks. My training volume is down, so I'm also going to be in a calorie deficit. So I'm stimulating enough to maintain, but I'm also going to be having sufficient protein to maintain in terms of like nutrition. So I'm going to be in a pretty deep calorie deficit, maybe lose for 3-4 weeks, maybe we'll lose something like 4 to 8 pounds, which would be pretty sweet. And what that's going to do is more of that's going to be body fat loss, and then I can regain that weight later on once I get back to really effective training, that high volume training, that optimal training at a gym when you have a plethora of equipment. Then I'm going to be able to be in a really good spot to then regain those 4 to 8 pounds in 2 to 4 months. So extends my bulking phase by 2 to 4 months to be in a deficit for 3 to 4 weeks. Enough protein, enough maintenance volume to retain the muscle that I have built, but in the time being, I'll be able to get a little bit leaner, which is cool because summer's here as well. But this is more of a resensitization, and then also allowing to regain that weight a little bit more productively. The higher you get in the body fat spectrum, the more pure your weight loss will be in terms of fat. So if I'm 40% body fat and I lose 20 pounds, probably going to be a lot of that muscle, maybe all of that. But if I'm 6% body fat and I lose 10 pounds, you're going to lose a little bit of lean tissue at that same time, but that tends to come back with that muscle memory in the long term. So kind of experienced that through my contest prep. So reiterate those two things. Mini cut, so I'm losing a quick 4 to 8 pounds, going to a pretty I wouldn't say it's like severe, but pretty aggressive calorie deficit to drop 4 to 8 pounds in about 3 to 4 weeks, and then be able to regain that weight and make sure it gives me 2 to 4 more months of being in a surplus and training in a surplus condition. In terms of training, I'm resensitizing my body to hypertrophy training by taking a strength block and reducing my volume to a maintenance volume, which maintaining your muscle is a lot easier than building your muscle. So being 8 to 12 sets per session, you could probably bring that down to 2 to 4 sets per session and maintain your muscle mass. So that is how I'm tackling this. This was like maybe 2-3 weeks ago. I started this. Today is Monday, and hopefully within a week, we get the gym access back. And then I can start my next training block, which I'll be going over in a future video because I was really excited to make it. Spent a couple hours just putting it together, and to me that's actually like really fun stuff. So that is how I'm tackling this. What can you do? And what I would recommend for you to do if you want to resensitize and make the most out of your next training block coming up in terms of hypertrophy and gaining as much muscle mass as possible. So what happens is when you train, you get certain fatigue and maybe micro tears, injuries that build up over days and only take a day, maybe a rest day, to recover. Then you also have ones that may build up over weeks, and you need a deload week to recover those. And then you also have, of course, as I mentioned before, desensitization, and also maybe smaller injuries that may take a longer period to recover. So that's why you want the phasic training at maintenance for 2 to 4 weeks or so, after like 12 weeks of productive hypertrophy training. So with that being said, what can you do? So that's when you want to consider deloads, rest days, deloads, and maintenance phases / strength blocks with lower total volume. So what can you do right now? I would say if you've been training, hitting it pretty hard at home, I would say take at least a deload week before your gym opens up. I would say to, of course, reduce your sessions maybe like 50%, maybe reduce your total sets by like 50%. Maybe also bring down your intensity from like failure down to like keep 3 reps or so from failure, and allow your body to get that week to really recover. But you're also doing some training to get some blood flow into the muscles to help them also recover as well. You probably recover a little bit better by doing something than laying on the couch all day. Blood flow is going to be something that's going to help anything recover because that's what delivers nutrients. So if you got bum elbows, probably not curling at all would maybe make it a little bit better. Of course, it's always dependent on the individual and the specific injury, but doing really, really light sets of bicep curls, pumping some blood in there that goes in and out, that may help it recover a little bit quicker in some cases as well. So I always try to get some blood flow, maybe a little pump with very light weight, and that sometimes helps. So I would say a deload, don't necessarily fully stop training, reduce the intensity, reduce the volume, and then you should be pretty primed for that next training session. If you've been hitting it real hard the last 12 weeks, maybe you have weights as well, been maybe making some good hypertrophy, maybe swap phases, maybe take maintenance training for 2 to 4 weeks. So again, bring down that total volume of sets. Maybe also if you have the weight available to you, because if you bring down your rep ranges to the strength rep ranges, you have to compensate to maintain that intensity, that proximity to failure, that difficulty per set. You're gonna need more weight. If you're doing sets of 20 with like, let's say 50 pounds, then if you're gonna bring that down to sets of 6, you're probably gonna need 70, 80 pounds. I don't even know. It's gonna be more in the lower rep ranges, so keep that in mind. So maybe you wanna switch to a maintenance kind of full phase, 2 to 4 weeks, or even make that into a strength phase. So kind of have that maintenance volume, bring that down considerably to maybe like 2 to 4 sets per muscle group per session instead of that 8 to 12. And then that's going to allow you to resensitize to some extent. So when you have all this equipment back available, you can start your next training session and you can make really good gains on pretty low volumes overall. When you're resensitized, just like if you're resensitized to caffeine, you're going to have 1 cup of coffee and you're going to feel it. Just like when we return to the gym and you only do like 3 sets of biceps, you're like, oh my God, this pump, like, whoa, I haven't had this in a while. Pump, it could be a good indicator that you are hitting the target muscle. Sometimes it is a good indicator of effectiveness during that training. If you're doing bicep curls and you feel a pump in your forearm and you feel nothing in your bicep, you may want to switch your exercise. But just want to share with you guys what I'm doing to potentiate, I like that word, potentiate my next training block after being training at home for like 12 weeks or so. So again, the TLDR, maybe I'll just put in the beginning of this video, like skip to here and then you'll hear pretty much the summary of this. The things that I'm doing is, again, taking that maintenance / strength training block after all this hypertrophy, giving a new kind of stimulus to my body and letting that hypertrophy stimulus resensitize so it'll be ready for later. I'm also taking a mini cut, dropping a quick 4 to 8 pounds over about 3 to 4 weeks by going right into a deficit and then going to gain that weight back slowly over time. So that expands my weight gain potential by like 2 to 4 months. So that is pretty much what I'm doing. Hope this helps you guys out. If this was super boring for you, sorry, this is fun stuff for me. But if you like this video, if you got something out of it, please like the video down below. Comment as well. If you want to do some further reading on these kinds of concepts, definitely recommend Renaissance Periodization, especially RP Dr. Mike, which I've just been watching a ton of their YouTube pretty lately. But thank you guys again so much for watching. Keep it flexible, and I'll see you guys in the next one. See you.